Every animal on Earth runs from fire. It is one of the oldest, deepest fears in all of nature. The wall of flame, the roar, the smoke. It means death, and everything alive knows to flee from it. Everything except one. Somewhere, hundreds of thousands of years ago, while an entire landscape fled from a wildfire, every gazelle, every lion, every bird, one small, trembling creature did the opposite. It walked toward the flames. It reached out, and instead of dying, it picked up a burning branch and carried the fire away with it. That single act may be the most important thing our ancestors ever did. More than any weapon, more than any tool. Because the creature that learned to hold fire in its hands did not just survive the night, it began to become human. This is the story of how we tamed the one thing that everything else on the planet was born to fear, and how that fire, in return, reached inside us and changed what we are. To understand how strange this is, you have to feel what fire meant back then. There were no matches. No one could make a flame. For most of our story, fire was not something you created. It was something that fell from the sky, a lightning strike in dry grass, a wildfire sweeping across the plain. It was rare, violent, and utterly terrifying. And here is the part that should keep you right where you are. The creature that first refused to run from that fire was not strong, not fast. It had no claws, no fangs, no armor of any kind. By every rule of nature, walking toward those flames should have killed it. Instead, it walked away, holding the one thing every other living creature was born to flee. And that single choice would go on to reshape our bodies from the inside. Our teeth, our jaws, even the size of our brains. By the end of this, you will be able to see the fingerprints of fire in your own skull. Picture our early ancestors watching it. Small, weak, easily killed. Everything in their instinct screamed the same thing every other animal felt: run. And for a very long time, that is exactly what they did. But somewhere along the way, one of them didn't. One of them stood at the edge of the burnt ground after the fire had passed, and noticed something. The animals that hadn't escaped, already cooked in the ash, warmth still rising from the embers, light in the coming dark. And instead of only fear, there was something new: curiosity. That is the quiet turning point of our whole species. Not strength, not speed. The willingness to walk toward the thing that everything else runs from. To look at terror and ask, what if this could be mine? It would have taken unimaginable courage and countless failures, burns, fires that died, fires that spread and destroyed. But slowly, our ancestors crossed a line no animal had ever crossed. They stopped being afraid of the flame, and they started to keep it. Here is something most people never think about. For a huge stretch of our history, humans could use fire, but they could not make it. Think about what that means. If you cannot start a fire, then a fire is the single most precious thing you own. Lose it, and you might not get another for months, until the next lightning strike. So our ancestors became something the world had never seen before, keepers of the flame. The fire could never go out. Someone had to feed it, day and night. Someone had to shield it from the rain, carry glowing embers wrapped in bark or packed in moss when the group moved, breathe it back to life at dawn. It was a responsibility passed around the group, and it may be one of the first real jobs human beings ever had. A task that demanded patience, memory, and care for something fragile. And carrying fire changed how we lived. A group with fire could go places a group without it could not. Into colder lands, into the mouths of dark caves that no predator would expect them to enter. The fire went first, pushing back the dark and the cold, and we followed it into a bigger world. Eventually, and this took an enormous span of time, someone worked out how to make a spark. Striking certain stones, spinning a stick against dry wood, until the heat itself caught. The day a human could create fire at will, everything accelerated. The most precious thing in the world was suddenly something you could carry in a pouch and summon whenever you needed it. Terror had become a tool. Now think about what fire actually gave them. Start with the night. Before fire, darkness belonged completely to the hunters. When the sun went down, the world filled with sounds, a low growl, a snapped twig, and out beyond the black edge of the world, pairs of eyes catching what little light there was. For our ancestors, night was the most dangerous time to be alive. To sleep was to gamble with your life. And then, one small circle of the world changed. A ring of orange light, the crackle of burning wood, the smell of smoke drifting into the dark, a smell every predator had learned to fear. Inside that ring, warmth. Outside it, the eyes still watched, but they would not cross. The fire had drawn a line on the ground that teeth and claws would not step over. For the first time, our ancestors could do something no prey animal truly does. They could sleep, really sleep, deeply. Not the stolen, half-awake minutes of an animal that must always be ready to run, but the deep, dreaming rest that rebuilds a brain and a body. The fire kept watch, so they didn't have to. And rested minds are sharper minds. They plan further, remember more, invent more. In a quiet way, the safety of the fire didn't just protect our ancestors' bodies. It gave their minds room to grow. But fire did something far deeper than warm the skin and guard the night. It reached inside the body itself. Here is the idea that many scientists believe is central to who you are. It's called the cooking hypothesis. And it goes like this. Raw food is hard work. A raw root, a piece of raw meat. Your body has to spend enormous energy just to break it down. And even then, it gives up only part of what it holds. Other apes spend many hours of every single day just chewing, and their bodies carry huge guts to process it all. Now hold that same food to the flame. Heat breaks it down before it ever reaches your mouth. It becomes soft, safe, and gives up far more of its energy with every bite. Cooking is like a second stomach outside the body, one that does much of the work for you, for free, and that extra energy had to go somewhere. Many researchers believe it went to fuel the single most expensive organ our line would ever build, the human brain. A brain is astonishingly hungry. It burns a fifth of all your energy while doing nothing at all. It is very hard to grow a brain like that on raw food alone. But on cooked food, suddenly it becomes possible. Look at what changed as fire entered our story. Our teeth got smaller. Our jaws got weaker. Our guts shrank. We no longer needed the massive grinding equipment of an animal that chews all day, because the fire was doing the chewing for us. In a very real sense, we outsourced part of digestion to the flame and spent the savings on thought. If that is true, then this is the quiet truth at the heart of it. Fire did not just keep us warm, fire helped make us smart. And then there is the last gift, the one that is easiest to overlook. Fire gave us the hearth. Before fire, when the sun set, the day was simply over. But a fire creates something that had never existed before: extra hours. A pool of warm light at the end of the day, when the work of survival is done and there is nowhere to be and no reason to sleep just yet. What do you do with those hours? You sit close. You share food from the same flames. You look at the faces around you, and you talk. Many believe this. The long evening around the fire is where so much of what makes us human was born. Story, memory, teaching the young, planning tomorrow, myths and laughter, and the passing of everything one generation knew to the next. The hearth became the center of the human world, the place you return to. The word home, in a sense, begins here, with a fire and the people gathered around it. Around that light, we hardened our spears, warmed our children, buried our fears, and slowly wove the thing we now call culture. Fire didn't just change where we could live or what we could eat. It changed how we were together. There is one more thing the fire did, and it may be the boldest of all. It let us leave home. Our species was born under a hot African sun. Our bare skin, our thin bodies, they were built for warmth, not cold. Without fire, there were whole continents we could never have touched. The freezing nights of the north, the mountains, the edge of the ice. To an animal built for heat, those places were a death sentence. But a creature that carries fire carries its own climate. With a flame at the center of the camp, our ancestors could walk into lands that should have killed them, wrapping themselves in the hides of animals, sheltering in caves lit and warmed by the hearth, pushing further and further into a colder, wider world. Fire was the passport that let a tropical animal conquer a frozen planet. And fire didn't only carry us, it sharpened everything we made. Hold the tip of a wooden spear to the flame, and the wood hardens, turning a soft point into something that can kill. Later, our descendants would learn to heat certain stones to make them easier to shape, then to melt rock itself and pull metal out of it. Copper, bronze, iron. Every furnace, every forge, every engine that would ever run on burning fuel traces back to this, one ancestor, refusing to run from the flames. Everything we would ever build began at the fire. It was our first laboratory, our first factory, our first source of power, beyond our own two hands. The whole modern world, in a way, is just a fire that never went out. So the next time you sit near a fire, a candle, a fireplace, a spark on a screen, and feel that strange, quiet pull toward the light, understand what you are feeling. It is 100,000 years old. It is the memory of the night the fire kept watch, of the ember carried carefully through the dark, of the meal that fed a growing mind, and the circle of faces glowing in the orange light, telling the first stories our kind ever told. You didn't inherit claws or fangs. You inherited the fire, and everything it made us. That flame is where this whole story begins. It is why this channel carries its name. So pull up close and stay a while. Sit down at the oldest campfire on Earth and follow along. This is EmberKind.
If you made it all the way here, you're already one of us. Subscribe to EmberKind, leave a like, and I'll see you at the next fire.